Yep, thank you very much. I think throughout last years there were many news about Russian hybrid attacks on NATO states. Especially I'm talking about damaging cables in the Baltic Sea, arms factories in Poland, England, Germany and so on. And there wasn't a really clear answer to that. I think there were mainly concerns and talks, but not effective steps to prevent that. And because of this, I think NATO somehow, may look slightly defenseless against Russia, hybrid attacks and generally. So maybe it's time to show that such actions, such attacks will have their consequences, and that there should be better reaction from NATO, more effort to deal with that, and maybe pushing some solutions which include better steps like that. Thank you.
Basically, I agree. That's the short answer, but let me explain a little bit more. We were used to call this hybrid, but basically this is state-sponsored terrorism, or at least state-sponsored destabilizing campaigns. You mentioned a few examples. I could add attacks on the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, trying to kill the boss of a big defense industrial company, and also the jamming of commercial airplanes in the Baltics. So the first thing we had to do is to acknowledge what we are really seeing here, and it's not hybrid. Again, it is state-sponsored terrorism, because you have to face the problem in the eye. Secondly, you need to have more information on what is exactly happening. That's what we did. So we established a few centers within NATO, and when it came, for example, to the undersea sea cables and critical undersea infrastructure with Maritime Command in the UK, we have now a center which is exactly tracing what is happening. But that is only facing it and following and tracing. It's not enough. I think we are really stepping up. And an example of this is what happened in the Christmas days last year, 25th, 26th of December. Again, an undersea sea cable was cut between Estonia and Finland. General Cavoli, our Supreme Allied Commander, under his responsibility, he launched what's so-called activity. Basically, it is a mission, but when you call it an activity, you do not have to have an agreement of the 32 allies. So, since I knew this and learned this, we only have activities now and no missions. But this activity is involving many ships, the latest undersea sea drone technology, and the most important thing is, all the information we are getting is that Putin, Vladimir Putin, he hates it. And that's exactly what we need. So we will from now on, in a, if necessary, asymmetrical way, react to these type of threats. Of course, we did already in the past, not always visibly. More stuff happened. But we will continue doing that. We will do it more visibly. It will be in many times in an asymmetrical way, because you do not always have to react exactly at the same spot and the same time as your adversary, your enemy. There's a long answer to again tell you, you're totally right, but we are changing our ways.
Okay. Anybody else wants to ask a question? So, someone at the back, and then here, and then there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. I would like to ask
Could you stand up so that I can see you, please? Otherwise, great. Could you stand?
Of course.
Great. Then.
I just will read my question. Do you think the insanely high cost for defense equipment is only because we lack economy of scale, or is it the greed of the defense contractors and their suppliers part of the problem? Thank you very much.
I'm not sure that that is the reason, but you're right that sometimes it's costing a very high amount of money. The problem is the price, the problem is the speed, the problem is that many defense companies have to put in place more shifts and more production lines. They are not doing that. They are asking for these 10-year contracts, but you know how it works in democracies. You work from election cycle to election cycle. So I'm telling them, these big industrial companies, you know that the money is there, you know that the demand is there, you are businessmen and women, start investing. Because what we now are seeing is that countries like Poland and Romania and Estonia are buying Korean defense industrial equipment. I think even Slovakia, you have bought from, where was it that we learned today? I mean, no, I forgot. But also, no, from outside the NATO, now I'm checking my team. Israel, from Israel. And of course, I love Israel, I love Korea, it's all great, but I even love more our 32 allies. So you're really working on this. This is one of my 3 priorities. Lasting peace in Ukraine, spending more and getting our industrial production going. And this is a problem not only for the European part of NATO, but also for the US. Because the US had over 80 big defense industrial companies. There are only 5 left, and they are not producing nearly enough. We are producing an ammunition in a full year, the whole of NATO, what Russia is producing in 3 months. And Russia is only 5% of the total NATO economy. So 1/20th of NATO is producing in 3 months what we are producing in a year. Luckily, you in this country have a big potential to again develop your defense industrial base. And you already have some big ammunition production sites. And you're producing a lot of the ammunition, which is now part of this so-called Czech initiative to get ammunition into Ukraine. So you guys are doing a lot, but all of NATO, we have to do much more.
There was somebody asking a question there, and then there.
Hello, and thank you for visiting us today, Mr. General Secretary. In recent months, we have observed how the new United States administration, especially, for example, Vice President of the United States, criticizing Europe for its insufficient contribution to the army. And this raises the question, what methods and principles can NATO use, or what principles can be employed in order to incorporate NATO, in order to prevent a potential disintegration of NATO? And what approach could help strengthen the unity of NATO and our allies? Thank you.
Well, I can only tell you that this US administration is totally committed to NATO, but they expect us to spend more. And they are right. I mean, watch it. Look out. In 2014, we agreed on this famous 2%. Nothing happened. Then Trump became president. Everybody woke up, and we started to spend more. Then the full Russian onslaught on Ukraine happened in 2022. We spent more. And so we are now spending 700 billion more in non-US NATO than before 2016, so before Trump became president. But it is not enough. Again, now we have to take a next big step. And I think it will be a huge step. We have to decide on this summer, but I guess we really have to move up to much more than 3%. When you now look at all the gaps we have in our armies, in our long-range missiles, in our air defense systems, in our logistics, our military mobility, we have so many issues and we cannot pay for them with the 2%. So it has to be really much more. And I hope that we can get to a conclusion on this in The Hague. And the good news is that if you do that, you would have much more of a fair burden sharing with the United States. But I'm absolutely not worried about the US. They're doing what is needed. I'm worried about us, whether we are able to step up. But I'm also optimistic because all the signals I'm getting now the last 2-3 months is that the coin has dropped, that people understand this is necessary. Many governments now, like Denmark yesterday, announcing a huge, big new investment. We have seen I know some countries will come out with big announcements over the coming weeks. So this is really good news. But one of the big issues in the German election, so I think we will get there, and it is necessary.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for coming here. And
thank you all for being here, because if I was only here, you were not. It would have been a boring afternoon.
That's true, but it's really important to us. So my question basically is more about the technology development of NATO, because now we can see that brave Ukrainian soldiers fighting with the drones, and they are very effective. And do you think that now NATO will take this experience, and do you like to develop this, like the drones, into the army of the NATO? And how maybe, the second question, how maybe the third-party companies or people who would like to dedicate, their life into drone makings can apply to NATO and do these drones by the NATO standards and, about the drones mostly. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, on this newest technology, the Ukraine war is, of course, giving us a lot of insights in modern warfare. And Ukraine is second to none capable of implementing these latest technologies. The problem is that the Russians only need 2 or 3 weeks to catch up. So there is a rapid acceleration going on in terms of applying the newest technologies. We are trying to capture them. So last week in Poland we opened JTEC. This is the first organization where Ukraine and NATO really work together, capturing all the lessons from the war in Ukraine and making sure we can apply them all over NATO. We know that there is some criticism now going on of countries still buying F-16s and F-35s. Whether that is still necessary, I think the growing body of opinion is that you need both, and the big platform F-35 type big ticket items, but also the latest technology. And how can you make them work in conjunction? Again, the war in Ukraine is giving us a lot of insights of how to do this. And then we have to make sure that these big companies start to work with small startups and scale-ups. Not easy, because a big company has all these internal rules, and typically they would choke off and kill any startup as soon as they start to merge with a big company. So you have to find ways to make sure that a startup can survive in that fabric of a big company, in that structure, in that texture. And I think there are many lessons how to do that. So this is all happening at the moment. And in NATO, we are working on that in headquarters in Brussels, a whole team working on innovation, together with the people working on procurement. Obviously, it is something which in the end has to be done by the 32 allies in their own military, in their own procurement programs, etc. But that is happening. So I'm rather optimistic, but we have to keep this going. Otherwise, we stick with a military system which is stuck in the past, in the 20th century, and we really have to move this to the 21st century, to this decennium, and taking all the lessons from Ukraine.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. I want to ask you about Kosovo. Since the recent changes in US international policies, there have been rumors that they might pull out their military and abandon their military base. I want to ask your opinion or your thoughts about the possible risk of conflict in the area.
Well, let me be perfectly clear. Everything I'm getting out of the US system is that they are totally committed to NATO and their present engagements. So let's see what happens. You might always have changes of policy or small adjustments that can always happen. The Slovaks, the Dutch and others are also doing this. But I have no reason to believe there will be dramatic announcements. And more generally on the Western Balkans, we have to be sure that we keep an eye on this. Because stability in Kosovo, stability in Bosnia, stability in Serbia, it is in all our interest. So we have had recent elections in Kosovo. I think they have not been finalized in a formal outcome, but it seems that the main party, who was basically governing Kosovo on its own before the elections, might need a coalition. Let's see how that plays out, but that is normal political democratic process, forming coalitions. Of course, we know there are certain issues we need to be very watchful of in Bosnia. The relationships in the region. I'm myself in constant contact with all the main leaders over there. I had the opportunity in the Munich Security Conference to speak with 2 out of the 3 members of the presidency of Bosnia. I will visit the region in March. So step by step we really try to maintain stability. And that is important because it is a region which has a history of instability. And luckily now for many years we have a hard-forged stability in that part of Europe, in the Western Balkans. We have to maintain that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming. Given the changes in Syria and the instability of the Middle East, as well as the Republic of Turkey's ambivalence in geopolitics, is NATO's southern flank neglected or perhaps put on hold where the focus is on the east? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I would not agree with you on Turkey. I think Turkey is a very important ally, and so far I've always had the best of exchanges with the senior Turkish leadership. Second, of course, when it comes to Syria, the Middle East, NATO is not party to any discussions there, or if there's a conflict, party to any conflict. It will be individual allies navigating the situation in the Middle East. But of course we follow it closely, to your point. And I was in Iraq 2 weeks ago because we have a NATO mission in Iraq. That's one, and that's helping them to develop their defense capabilities. And also their Minister of the Interior is making use of all the training facilities we provide there through this NATO mission in Iraq. And we have a southern neighborhood policy. So there is even a special representative. I believe even it is my special representative, not only NATO's. So my special representative to the Global South. And sorry, not to the Global South, to the southern neighborhood. Working with the Middle East, working with Northern African countries. We have close cooperations with Jordan, with Egypt, Tunisia, Mauritania, Cape Verde. And we are expanding that. And why is this important? Because we know that China and Russia are, particularly in Africa, rapidly trying to expand their influence in that part of the world. And it is important that we stay very much involved. Not only because Spain, Portugal and Italy think this is important. I agree with them, it is important. These allies, I think, are totally spot on here, but it is important for the whole of the alliance. So that's why we are concentrating very much on that area.
Okay, I would like to ask you, what is your position towards Britain's suggestion to deploy troops in Ukraine, since USA is one of the main players in NATO and they are strongly against this suggestion?
The US is not against that suggestion. No. The US has said we do not want US troops on the ground. That is what the US said. But they has also said everything is on the table. But there was also a clear message coming out of the US system that they don't want to have boots on the ground. No, I think there is really in NATO a large-scale agreement that we need strong security guarantees for Ukraine to go forward after a peace deal. And I know that countries like the Netherlands and Denmark and the UK and France are thinking what that could be. That was why we had a meeting in Paris on Monday, and there was another meeting yesterday, and there will be more meetings coming up, I think, to coordinate the European support for a peace deal in Ukraine. I am myself optimistic about President Trump's initiative. Of course, it is still early stage, but I think it is important that he started this peace initiative now with the Russians. But we all agree also that we have to make sure that for any peace deal going forward, there have to be strong security guarantees. We also agree that strong security guarantees, if provided by European countries, need a backup by the United States, not with boots on the ground. But we still need generally a backup from the US to make sure that the deterrence is there. But also because the US provides certain capabilities, again, not with boots on the ground, but necessary to make it possible for European countries to help there. So that whole process is now taking place. And I'm very glad that it takes place, because last week in Munich, during the security conference, many Europeans were whining and angry that they were not involved and why were we not at the table. But luckily now they started to coordinate amongst themselves. So that is important, and being positively engaged in this American peace initiative. And I think that is necessary. And Europe can add a lot here. So I've been myself in constant contact with all the senior leaders in the US, Zelensky yesterday, also European leaders in Paris and through other ways and phone calls. So a lot is happening to make sure that a peace deal can be backed up by strong security guarantees. Because we have to make sure that whenever there is a peace deal in Ukraine, that it is lasting, that it is enduring. As Pete Hegseth, the former US Secretary of State of Defense, the new Secretary of State of Defense of the US has said last week, it should not be a Minsk III. It has to be lasting, and then you need security guarantees.
Thank you very much. I have a question more targeted towards the future. So how do you see the possible future expansion or enlargement of NATO, especially when considering countries such as Ukraine or Georgia? Thank you very much.
Well, in the end, it is the sovereign right of countries somehow within the Northern Atlantic. I mean, if it is New Zealand, it's a bit difficult because it's not part of the Northern Atlantic. We, by the way, have a strong cooperation with New Zealand, Australia, Japan and Korea, the IP4 countries. But of course, they will not become members as they are not part of the Euro-Atlantic. But countries within the Euro-Atlantic who want to join can make that known. And then there is a whole process in place, step by step, to potentially make that happen. In the end, that's up to each of these countries. And I can only repeat, as I said before, that Russia has no vote or veto on who joins NATO. Only when they themselves want to join NATO, then they have a vote and a veto. But I've not seen that application recently. So I don't think that will happen. But and on Ukraine, that's very much on the table. I mean, it was decided in Washington that there is this irreversible path of Ukraine to become a member of NATO. But to be honest to the US, having said we don't want it to be part of a peace process now, it was not promised to Ukraine that it will be part of a peace deal. So we have to see how these peace talks end. But there's no automaticity. But we have agreed on Ukraine becoming, in the future, a member of NATO.
There's somebody right at the back.
Yes. Thank you very much. Goedemiddag.
Goedemiddag. Bent u Nederlands?
Ja, zeker.
How did you end up here? Tell me.
I'm an exchange student from the Netherlands, from Utrecht.
And why did you decide for this fantastic institution?
Because, I don't know, I want to go to Central Europe, because I have lived in Western... I'm sorry everyone, Central Europe.
Central Europe.
Central Europe, I'm sorry. I've lived in Western Europe all my life, and I'm very interested in the European Union, and I want to know what life is here.
Great.
Like.
How long are you here now?
2 weeks. Actually.
2 weeks, okay. So you have only 13 days more of experience of living in Ohio. Yeah.
So it's really, really cool to see you here, ex-Mr. President.
Yeah.
I have a question. It's a bit of a hypothetical one, but in the news you see that Zelensky and Trump are a bit arguing. Trump called Zelensky a dictator. Do you think it's likely that Trump will make a deal with Putin without Ukraine's support? And if Ukraine doesn't support it, what should the European Union do next, in your opinion? Thank you.
Well, of course, Ukraine has to be part and will be part, and the US has said this, of peace negotiations, because it's about their country. So I'm really not worried there. They will be part of that. But it only started, I mean, a couple of days ago. So it is so early stage. And I have confidence in the team in the US negotiating this. But no doubt Ukraine will be involved in peace talks. Absolutely.
Thank you. So I would like to ask a question. Is it possible that Slovakia would be excluded from closer negotiations because of our pro-Russian government, in the case it's needed to do so? It's a bit of a question.
You would be excluded from what?
From negotiations, some closer negotiations in NATO.
No, let me make perfectly clear. In NATO and in the EU, you not always agree. In the end, you do agree. It takes time sometimes, you negotiate, etc. But many countries will start from many different points of view, and then you will gradually come together. Slovakia is one of the most integrated, I think the most integrated country compared, a bit the same like the Netherlands. You are part of the EU, Schengen, the Eurozone, NATO. You are actively participating in all those formats and structures, highly respected. So I don't think that worry is warranted. No, not at all.
Good afternoon, Secretary General.
Hi.
As a Ukrainian, in the context of game theory...
You're Ukrainian?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm interested especially in the context of game theory in political science. How does NATO assess the ongoing war in Ukraine as a strategic interaction between Russia, NATO and Ukraine. Specifically, how do you evaluate the payoff structures and potential national equilibria in this scenario, considering the escalation risk and deterrent strategies?
Of course, NATO is not party to the conflict, but NATO, through the command in Wiesbaden, is coordinating the training and the military equipment coming into Ukraine, and through JTEC, the center in Poland, collectively we're capturing all the lessons. But it is up to individual allies and countries outside NATO, bilaterally with Ukraine, coming to security agreements. I mean, my country and many other countries have drawn up bilateral security agreements with Ukraine. And I think that is very important. But to your question, of course, it is first of all an unprovoked Russian onslaught on your country, starting in 2014, and then the full-scale war breaking out next Monday 3 years ago, with hundreds of thousands of people on both sides of the border, killed, seriously wounded. It is unbelievably sad when you think about it, and so many beautiful cities in Ukraine being seriously damaged and having to be rebuilt. So the cost of all of this is enormous. But it is your country fighting for its survival and for its sovereignty. That is between you and Russia. But we also have to acknowledge that Russia is working with others, with North Korea, with China, and with Iran. So when a peace deal is reached on Ukraine, let's make sure that one Xi Jinping, the first secretary of the Communist Party of China, will be watching this and will be interested in the outcome. And if it is a weak deal for the West, he might think of some next steps himself in the Pacific. So all the theaters, as so-called, Northern Euro-Atlantic and in the Pacific, they are more and more connected.
Thank you. Can I give you one more question?
Please. You have the microphone, so you have the power.
What advice would you give to the future generation of Ukrainian leaders?
Well, first of all, it's not up to me. I can only say I have the highest respect for what Ukraine is doing and enduring. You have, from day one, been fighting, where Putin would think in 3 or 4 days you would have to give in to him, and you didn't. You fought back. You were able to capture back large parts of the country Putin originally was able to capture in February 2022. We all remember that famous video President Zelensky made when he was offered a ride to Poland to get into safety, and that he said, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." And then he came out of the presidential palace saying, "I'm here with the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the Chief of the Military, myself, the President. We are all here," and that was a rallying call, I think, to the whole of Ukraine. And one of the most moving short clips I have ever seen. In all its simpleness, extremely effective, because it showed the leadership, not only of the senior leaders in Ukraine, but also of the general population. But for the young people in Ukraine, I mean, I wish for you this war to end as soon as possible. And then you will have to rebuild the country, but you will have so many stories to share about how proud soldiers and proud citizens have withstood this Russian onslaught, that I hope you will be very proud, that you will share those stories and they will go down the generations. And of course that you will build your future and will have happy lives and really be integrated as you wish in the Euro-Atlantic structures like the EU and NATO. I really wish that for your country.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your answer.
We will take one more question.
Good afternoon. I would like
Hi.
to ask...
Are you also from the Netherlands?
No.
No.
But my sister lives in the Netherlands. She found a Dutch guy.
Very good.
Do you think that increasing the contribution of the countries might lead to their withdrawal from NATO, especially considering the misinformation campaigns? Thank you.
Again, I missed the first half of the question because the microphone was a bit too high.
If you think that increasing the contribution of the countries might lead to their withdrawal from NATO?
No, I don't think any country will withdraw from NATO. Why would they? I mean, we are a collective defense. We are the strongest, the most powerful defense corporation in the world's history. I mean, yeah, if you want to withdraw, you can. It is a democratic organization. Nobody will stop you. But I've not spoken to any leader who wants to leave NATO. No, people want to join. Countries want to join. Nobody wants to leave. But being in NATO, we have to make sure that it is not one paying more than the rest. And at the moment, of course, what we see is that the US is about a little bit more than 50% of overall NATO economy, but is paying much more than 50% of the overall NATO defense spending. And we see some countries on the eastern flank, like Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, but also Poland, really ramping up now defense spending. We see other countries now rapidly following, like Sweden and Denmark. I'm hearing some encouraging signals from other countries, maybe even yours, here in Slovakia, but not up to me to make any announcements. But that gives me hope that we will get to a much higher number to reach with a credible time path at the Hague Summit to decide on that. And not because Donald Trump once did. Yes, also because he is right that America should have a fair deal. But because we want to protect ourselves. And we know, as I said in my short introductory remarks, we cannot defend ourselves going forward given the rapid ramp-up of defense spending and production in Russia. So we have to do it. We all have to do it to make sure that we maintain our deterrence, that he will never, ever try again to capture 1 square mile or kilometer of Ukraine, but also not to capture any square mile or kilometer of any NATO country whenever he would wish so. That he knows that he was the full onslaught of all of us on Russia. And therefore we have to remain strong, and that is why we need more spending. Please help me there. Tell your politicians to do this. Tell your banks and pension funds that they can invest in defense. I really need you as ambassadors here. That's why I'm here. I mean, you thought I was here for you. No, you are here for me. You are from now on my ambassadors to make this happen. And thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us here. Thank everybody for coming. I'm really thankful that you provided a sense of reassurance to many people. I know that...
And urgency, I hope.
Definitely. I know there are many people from Ukraine in the audience, and I think they really appreciate your reassurance. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for linking in your speech Jan Amos Comenius, and we really appreciate that you really mentioned his. And we would just like to ask you to do a signature in our guest book before we say goodbye.
Final remark to the students. Thank you for being here, first of all. And maybe one advice. I've always lived my life in the assumption that it is easier to ask for forgiveness afterwards than for permission up front. So take some risks. And when you have strong ideas, follow them, even if you have many seniors telling you you can't. Because potentially you might be right. And if not, at least you learn something. So really enjoy your life, enjoy your studies here. Let's stay together and make sure that we do strange things with our talents. That makes the whole world better.